Hi, it's Lauren, and to celebrate the brand new Whimsy Stamps releases today, we're going to be making this fun shark slimline shaker card. The brand new products that I'm going to be using are these Scallop circle frame dies, our Lookin Shark Stampin' outline dies, and the new Slimline Taffy paper pack. I've got one of my sharks here in my Misty and some mixed media paper because I'm going to be doing some watercoloring. And when I watercolor, I love to emboss my images because it really just helps keep the color inside the lines. So I am going to be using my VersaFine in Twilight ink, and I'm going to stamp that twice to make sure I have a nice crisp image. I am using a detailed embossing powder in Clair so that way I can see that blue ink through the embossing powder. I've got my heat gun warmed up and I'm just going to emboss that powder. It's basically a plastic, so we're just melting it down with this really hot air. And once it's cool, I will get out my Zig Clean Color water brush pens and we're going to start watercoloring. I'm using this dark blue, kind of a grayishy blue color, applying ink to where I want it to be the darkest on my shark, and then using the blender pen to blend that out into the open area of my image. So I repeat that for both my fins, and because my fins are dark, I really want my shark's jaw and kind of, well, his jaw around his big open mouth to be lighter so you can distinguish between the flipper or fin and I guess I'm thinking of a dolphin, his fins and the sides of his mouth. I wanted there to be a clear distinction between the two. I'm going to color in the tail the same way as I did his fins, and then again trying to keep his face a little lighter so you can see the difference between different parts of his body. Plus I figured the fins and the tail and his top fin are going to be further away from you when it comes to depth perception, so his face should be a little brighter and the darker parts are more behind him because he's swimming up and wishing you a happy hello. Although he is super cute, there is still a lot of teeth in that big mouth. So I'm going to keep coloring my shark. I just wanted to show you how I blend the colors together. If you want more tips on watercoloring, you should really head over to the Whimsy Stamps channel and check out Lisa's videos. That girl is the queen of watercoloring as far as I'm concerned with these Zig Clean Color brushes. She's the one that turned me on to getting the blender pen, because if you watch any of my earlier videos, I just use a water brush pen that I squeeze when I need some water and wipe off in between colors, where this is a much controlled output. It matches the same type of blend and liquid that's coming out of the watercolor brushes, the ones with actual ink in them. So you're getting the same smooth texture while you're blending out the color. I hope that made sense. I'm going to link the Whimsy Stamps channel down below so you can find her videos and also check out just her amazing talent when it comes to watercoloring. So now the body of my shark is done. I'm using a really pale blue color to color in his eyes. I didn't want them to be like the stark white eyes. And I've cleaned off my blender pen and now blended that into the rest of the eye. I wanted there to be a little bit of shadow on those big teeth of my shark, so I'm just using a light gray and adding in just a little bit of shadow. And then I'm using a darker gray to color in his mouth. I thought having a red mouth would be terrifying, like he just ate something and his mouth is like covered in blood. I thought that would be kind of creepy, but I didn't want it to be this dark nothingness either in his mouth. I am getting real dark on this video, aren't I? And so I thought maybe I could blend the two together. So I started off with a dark gray on the top and a red on the bottom, and I realized my red is a little pink. That's okay. I'm just going to keep blending between the two and adding more color as I think it needs it. But just wanted to have that fade from dark to red to kind of give the illusion like he has a tongue inside of his mouth, or just that there's, you know, color, and it's not nothingness, but it's also not blood. And wow, I hope you guys are still sticking with me on this video because I feel like I have gotten real dark about sharks. Anyway, we're just going to keep blending between these two colors to give our wonderful shark some depth inside of his very large toothy smile. So I've gone between the two, adding a little bit more of that dark gray because I thought it was still too light inside, and just going back and forth, cleaning off my blender brush as it's needed, and I finally am good with how it's looking. See, it's not so bad. It's not as terrifying as I was making it out to sound just 30 seconds ago. I have my outline die from the set. I'm just using some low tack tape to help me keep that in place, and I'm going to go ahead and run that through my die cut machine. I have also run through my die cut machine a bunch of the second largest scallop circle frames, and I'm just using the actual frame part of the dies. Each die cuts out the scallop circle frame and then an inside circle, and they both have adorable stitching details. So this is really great. I've got a bunch of green circles for a future card. I am going to create my own shaker frame, so I've die cut them out 10 times. I am saving 2 of them, and I'm gluing 2 stacks of 4. So I have 2 circle frames, and I'm going to pull out these clay fish elements that are sold in the Whimsy stamp store, and they're these fun little bright fish, and I just want to make sure that it's thick enough that these fish can move, but not being overly thick and having to cut out, you know, a grip more of these circle frames. So I have my 2 stacks. I just pulled out some acetate, and I'm using the inner circle, and I'm cutting around it because I want my acetate to be larger than the open circle, but not terribly large that you can see it within the scallops of the frame. So there you go. It's perfect. It's slightly larger than the actual inside circle. I'm going to use my wet glue, and I'm just going to apply glue. And at first I was trying to be really careful at just getting it around the circle, but honestly it's not that big of a deal because I'm going to add another circle frame on top of it to kind of sandwich in that acetate. So go ahead and get glue everywhere along that scallop. It's totally fine. And to cover that acetate, just like I said, I'm going to use some wet glue on one of my circle frames that I set aside. And now I have a little shaker window. You can't see the edge of the acetate, and it just makes a really fun shaker element. We're going to put lots of fun fish inside. I'm going to repeat the same process for the other shaker, but I was going to show you again how I cut my acetate since I was so off camera for the first one. So here you can see I'm lining in the corner, leaving some room around the edges in those 2 corners, or the 2 sides that my circle is against, and I'm just eyeballing it. I'm just cutting around my circle, making sure again that I have plenty of room for the glue to stick to the frame, that it's larger than the inside circle but not too large that you can see it in between the scallops. Okay, so now those 2 frames for my shakers are done. I also die cut those same size circles in my Taffy Slimline paper. As you can see, it creates a perfect inside, and there's also a really cute scallop detail. And I'm just gonna start lining them up. As I was playing with these totally reminded me of Daisy sunglasses. I really think this would be so cute, making sunglasses on a card, and these are, you know, the eye parts. I really need to look up names of things before I start recording because there's so many times where I'm like, you know, the thing, and I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, which is not wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about. But, you know, the frames and the lenses of glasses, I think it would be so cute to make Daisy sunglasses using these dies. And now I'm going to get back to my card. So I am gluing down these taffy circles. I'm trying to center them as best as possible onto my blue cardstock that I'm using as a background for my card. And I'm just lining them up to be equidistant from the edges, but also centered to the top and bottom of my slimline card here. And I'm just playing with my frames, making sure I'm happy with the placement before I continue. And I'm good to go. So I decided that I really wanted those green fish. I thought the pink was too bright for this card, even though there's lots of pink in his mouth. But I put in a ton of green fish, and I put in a few of the yellowy orange fish because there is some yellow on that taffy paper, and I really wanted to kind of bring that out. I'm using my little embossing tool that has some baby powder in it around the edges inside of my shaker window. I use a lot of wet glue to glue all of those frames together, so adding that baby powder will just make sure there's nothing terribly sticky and my little clay fish won't get stuck all along the edges of the shakers. I'm going to use wet glue to glue these down, so I applied it just to the frame and I am placing it around the circles onto my card base. And I'm going to do that for both of these frames. Next, I will start working on adding my shark, but before I do that, the more I look at my background, the more I'm sad that it looks so plain. I was like, what am I doing? I add splatter to everything, and I didn't do it this time. So I brought out my Mermaid Escape stamp set, and there's these little bubbles in the set, and I thought I could just stamp these random bubbles in VersaMark to add a subtle background. It's kind of hard to see right now because it is a VersaMark. It creates kind of a tone-on-tone look. You can see it a lot more once the ink's dry, but I'm just going to go around with these bubbles and do some upside down and right side up, all still in a vertical fashion so the bubbles look like they're going up the card. And I'm doing that all around the background, and I feel like that really kind of fixed the plainness I felt about the background, and I think it looks really good. So now I can start building up more onto my card. So I lay my shark down and I'm like, I need more. This is not going where I thought it was going to go, so maybe I'm going to use a seaweed from Mermaid Escape. So I stamp a few of those down and emboss them just like I did with the shark, and I'm going to use my greens from my Zig color brushes, and I applied a light color down and then using my blender marker to blend that out into the open space. Again, very similar to how I color, I start with the darkest parts of the image and blend it out into the lighter parts to create shadow and depth on my images. So I did that for 4 of my seaweed pieces that I stamped, and then I am going to go ahead and fussy cut those little guys out. And once I have the 4 of those, I am going to layer them where I want on the card along with my shark, and I'll finally feel like this card looks a little busier, it looks more fun and exciting instead of our murderous shark. I'm just kidding. He's super friendly. I mean, look at that beautiful smile. He's one of those fish are friends, not food kind of sharks. He's a vegetarian shark. So now I'm going to start layering my elements and really getting this card put together. I'm going to double up on my foam squares to give my shark a lot of depth on this card, and that way he sticks out further than our scallop shaker frames. So I have him glued down to the center of the card. I originally was going to use that Your Jawsome sentiment stamped on the same green paper, but I just didn't like it. I didn't think it was bright enough. I don't know. I wasn't feeling it, so I'm going to change my mind in a little bit. I'm using some wet glue to glue down these 4 pieces of seaweed. I've got 2 on the right and 2 on the left, and I'm really glad I added these. I think it adds just a little more to the card, brings in some more brightness. The taffy paper and that green paper are a little more, I wouldn't say muted because they are still very bright and fun, but a little more muted compared to my shark. So adding these brighter green pieces of seaweed I think really stepped up the card. So now that those are all glued down, here is where I'm going to completely change my mind on that sentiment. I just didn't feel it. I don't know. I think it was the green. I wanted something a little brighter, so I stamped Smile on a piece of white cardstock instead, and I'm really happy I went that way. I thought, again, it adds a little more brightness to this card, so I popped that up with a couple foam squares and adhered that right above the shark. So now I can get this onto a card base. I just cut a piece of white cardstock down, so my card base is 8.5 by 3.5 once it is scored and folded. I'm going to add some wet glue behind my blue piece of cardstock here, and I'm just using my Misty to help me make sure I'm lining those up perfectly since my background piece is the same size as my card base. And there we have our final card. I end up adding a little bit of pops of color of this like kind of a tealishy blue you'll see in the final picture. But other than that, you can check out this fun shaker card. I hope you enjoyed this really strange adventure with me to make this card. You can find the description down below with links to purchase everything I used on this card. Thanks again for sticking with me. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and if you're new, I hope you'll subscribe. Have a wonderful day.